Good evening, everyone, and welcome. First off, I just want to thank you all for spending the next hour with us learning about some exciting updates here at CariFree. A few housekeeping items to start with. Just so you know, all participants are muted throughout the presentation. So at any point you have questions, please type those into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen. Take note that you might have to escape out of the full screen mode in order to see that box. At the end of the presentation, we will have about 10 minutes to answer some of the questions we receive. If we are unable to answer yours tonight, we'll be replying to them throughout the week via email. There will be an opportunity at the end of the webinar also to connect with us. And with that, I would like to introduce our speakers this evening. First, we have Dr. Kim Cooch, CEO and founder of Oral Biotech, manufacturers of the CariFree system. Dr. Cooch has successfully been practicing dentistry for over 30 years and still practices 3 days a week here in Albany, Oregon. He has incredible passion for what he does, and his vision to create effective CAM protocols continues to drive him in his research to improve caries diagnosis and treatment. I would also like to introduce our co-host, Kendall Clark. Kendall has trained thousands of offices in implementing the CariFree system and is excited to share her experience and insight with us tonight. With that, I would like to hand it over to Kendall to get us started.
To Laura, and I would just like to start off by thanking everyone on the call for joining us tonight. We are very excited to have you all with us, and even more excited to introduce the new CariFree CTx product line. I will just say for our current customers out there, no need to worry. Very little has changed with regard to the content of our CariFree products. We really just updated how the products are labeled, how they're packaged, and how we're talking to patients about the products. So here's the agenda of what we will be covering tonight. First, Dr. Cooch is going to give us a quick update on the CAM research. I know one big study was recently published that he would like to share with you. And we will go over the breakdown of the new system and the 3 different methods of Canberra assessment that you can choose to implement in your practice. And last but not least, we will, of course, introduce the new CTx product line and kits that we've designed based on all of our customer feedback. So, Dr. Cooch, I will let you go ahead and take it first.
All right, Kendall, and welcome everybody tonight. I'm excited as well as everybody else here. This web tonight represents 16 months of work by our team here. So it's really exciting for us to get an opportunity to introduce this to all of you because we've been working at this what seems for like a long time. I want to start by just doing a quick review of some of the research I think is pertinent that we should all be up to speed on. And this first paper was published by John Featherstone and his research group at UCSF, and it was published in the CA journal back in October of this last year. And they looked at basically over a period of several years. This study involved 12,954 patients and looked at their caries risk, identified disease indicators, and looked at different risk factors that contributed to the disease, and then tried to quantify and weigh out what does this disease look like, what are the specific risk factors, what are the disease indicators, and then also how does the biofilm, what role does it play in that as well. When they looked at that, and this was at UCSF at the school, they collected data and found that basically as they profiled these patients, about 15% were classified as low risk, 20% basically were moderate risk, and almost 63% were either classified as high or extreme risk. Now, the interesting thing is they followed these patients for a couple of years. They got very good data. This is a large, randomized, double-blind clinical trial where they collected data on these cohorts. So we have very good data on the odds ratios for each one of those factors and disease indicators, and also looking at their bacterial levels. Interestingly, then they also followed these patients over a period of time. The patients that were diagnosed initially as high or extreme risk, basically about 3 out of every 4 of those high-risk patients had a new cavity within 1 year from the time that they had been diagnosed and their treatment had been completed. So there is value in terms of camera in terms of using Caries risk assessment. This is data that I like to share with my patients because it's important for them to know if I see you and you are high risk for this disease and you do nothing differently, that you have a 75% chance that within the next year that you're going to have at least one additional cavity. And so it kind of gives you some information that patients really need to make their decisions with. And then this paper was just published literally this month in the Caries Research Journal, and so I really want to share it with you because certainly Featherstone has touched all of us. Anybody that's involved in Caries risk assessment globally has been touched by John Featherstone, and he's been just a superb mentor to me and to all of our groups. So this study that they did, again, his group, research group at UCSF, they took 131 adults, all of whom were high or extreme Caries risk. They had cavitated teeth, and then they looked at them and wanted to start targeting therapy and see how that affected this disease over a period of time. And so they looked at the mutant streptococci, lactobacillus, and fluoride levels. They assessed those every 6 months on these patients. And in the patients, all of the teeth were restored. Then the test group used 1,100 part per million standard, fluoride toothpaste. They also used a chlorhexidine rinse for a 2-week period every 3 months for a period of 2 years. And they continued to examine the mutant streptococci and lactobacillus and fluoride during that period of time. The results are there was a change in the mutant streptococci level for the test group, but there wasn't any difference from the lactobacillus or the fluoride levels. However, there was a change in the DMFS in the test group. It reduced by about 24% over this period of the study. Things were targeting antimicrobial and fluoride therapy based on their microbial and fluoride levels favorably altered the balance between the pathological and the protective Caries risk factors. So by going through this targeted therapy, they were able to favorably alter the balance by reducing the mutant streptococci levels, by reducing the DMFS scores in the test group. So it gives us good data to say, this works. Using targeted therapy on patients, using Caries risk assessment has value. The commentary on that would be that camber is important. I mean, the therapy works. They used a 2-year continuous regimen on these patients, and they reduced the Caries DMFS scores. But I would say my one comment on this was that chlorhexidine doesn't affect the lactobacillus. That's been in other studies, and I really think there are better antimicrobial agents we could be using maybe to treat this disease with. The challenges that we have, I think, one of the problems that we come across as practitioners is we take all of these large population studies, and now you and I need to go back to our practices, and we have to take this evidence and apply that, and how do we make sense of it, and how do we apply it into our practice? You're sitting there with a patient who has high Caries risk. How am I going to approach their targeted therapy, and what am I going to do? The challenge for us as practitioners is these population studies are cross-sectional. We look at a reduction of DMFS by 24%, or we look at, some outcome as a percentage against the population. And the challenge I've got is I'm not looking at a population. I'm sitting with an individual, and I'm trying to make a decision on what patient would benefit from best and going forward. Like, what's going to be the best thing I can do for my patient 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What is the treatment outcome going to be specifically for this individual? And one of the examples I like to use in this is really that there's a tremendous amount of evidence base. The AA Council on Scientific Affairs has recommended that we routinely seal over non-cavitated Caries lesions. And even if there is radiographic evidence into the dentin, like D1 non-cavitated lesions, that we should use pit and fissure sealants. And evidence is clear. We've got all of these studies. We've got system reviews of the studies. We've got all this evidence that says we should routinely do this because it reduces the decay by a given percentage, and it's safe and effective. The problem we've got as practitioners is we look at the individual who's sitting in my chair, and I have to make a decision, do I want to seal over that non-cavitated lesion on this person or not? Because it's not like a percentage reduction in their outcome It's more, this is either going to be successful for this patient or it's going to be a failure for this patient. And if it's a failure, I know what the mode of failure might look like, and I've seen some of those, and they can be catastrophic. So I look at that and go, you know, I don't know if I want to do that on this particular patient, and I make those decisions based on their Caries risk. But we all look at that and have to make a decision on an individual longitudinally. So it becomes a challenge for us in terms of how we take the evidence that we've got and how we apply it in our clinical practice.
You are absolutely correct, Dr. Cooch. That is what I would say is one of the biggest issues we see with camera implementation in the private practice, and also, you know, what many of my practices have shared with me personally as they're going through that implementation phase. However, when you really boil it down, I think we can all agree the goal of CAMBRA is really very simple. We want a way to accurately diagnose our patient's risk, be able to offer individualized therapy options, so ultimately we just get the best possible treatment outcomes. And so with that simple goal in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at what most practices are looking for when deciding on a CAMBRA program for their patients, and a program that fits best within their practice. So most practices are really looking for two things. Number one, a simple assessment roadmap, and number two, a simple prescription roadmap. However, there are a few key decisions that need to be made in any practice if their system is going to be successful. So we'll start with just a couple of the questions to see what the different options are. The question that you should be asking yourself is, who do you want to assess? Some practices are looking to use the benefits of the population-based CAMBRA studies to assess and prevent caries for all of their patients, and the key word there being all of their patients. So these are the practices that want to perform risk assessment and track each and every patient's biofilm challenge, not just treat patients with current decay, but catch patients early and stop the cycle before decay sets in. So these practices typically don't mind investing significant time and effort implementing the program because prevention is probably part of their mission. Other practices might just be looking for a simple program to use for maybe just the 5 to 10% of their patients that are a real struggle to control. So those patients that have a high caries incidence and maybe need to do something different because what they're currently doing just isn't working. These practices typically want it to be a quick and easy system to implement, something that's not going to take a significant investment of time. And then the second question to ask yourself is, which data points do you want to gather on the population of patients that you've selected? So here are the three options. Number one, do you want to have the risk factor conversation with your patients to ensure that you're discovering the why they're presenting with disease? Some practices do, some practices don't, which is totally fine. And we now have a system that fits both of those options. The second thing, within the population you've selected, do you want to be testing for biofilm activity to determine if the antibacterial treatment is necessary or not? Again, some offices do, some offices don't, but we have a program either way. And then the last data point to assess is disease indicators. Most practices are already looking at disease indicators anyway, so if that is all you want to use to assess and target patients, we have a program for that as well. And the important part to understand here is that the system changes just slightly. It's not a major change, but it changes slightly depending on which patients you're assessing and which data points you're using to assess those patients. Then, based on your answers to the two assessment questions, who and what do you want to look at, we now have 3 different caries management guides that are designed specifically to target the right therapy for right patients at the right time. which is our goal, if we remember going back to just a few slides ago. And so I won't be walking through each one of these in detail tonight, as we have a lot of information to share with you. But if you would like more information on how each of these three systems work, we will have some short recorded videos that we can send you. Those will be available soon, so please feel free to contact us. We'll put up our contact information at the end of the webinar, and we'd be happy to send you those videos. So now we have chosen the system that we would like to implement, and within that system, we are going to be classifying some population of patients from low to extreme risk. So then we just need to know what do we do next? What is the next step? How to get patients the right therapy at the right time and explain the therapy quickly and easily using verbiage the patient is going to understand. Sounds very simple, doesn't it? So there are a lot of products and a lot of recommendations out there in the literature. And practices have asked us repeatedly for a system that's easy to prescribe and explain to patients. So we here at CariFree, the team, have spent, like Dr. Cooch said, the last couple of years just developing and working on a product system that would make this process much easier, not only for the practitioner, but also for the patient to understand. And so you could spend years reviewing all of that literature on Caries treatment options and try to figure out what is appropriate for which patients, which I commend many offices are already doing in some form or another. But one of the major issues those offices face when doing that is just when to prescribe each type of treatment and what is the regimen and order the patient should use them in. And it can become very, very complicated very, very quickly. So thankfully, we have simplified the therapy options, and it really boils down to these 5 different treatment agents. And we're going to spend the majority of the rest of this presentation and the webinar tonight talking about these 5 agents. So pH neutralization, broad-spectrum antibacterial therapy, fluoride, xylitol, and nano-HA or some form of calcium phosphate for remineralization support. And so the new CTx program is designed specifically based on these 5 agents, and the guide seen here provides a very simple visual of the different therapy options that are available. So it was a really complex problem, but the new CariFree CTx program is designed to make the process very simple. So first, let's get into and take a quick look at each of these 5 therapy agents, just so that we can kind of refresh on those. The first treatment component is pH neutralization. I'm actually going to throw it back to Dr. Cooch and let him talk with you briefly about this agent here.
Well, Evelyn, you know, as I'm sitting there looking at the slides as you're presenting this, one of the things that I think is really important that we often overlook is just the complication of how we prescribe therapies. And I looked at that, like that treatment list that you had, and it's like, you know, patients are going to have to comply to that, you know, so they're not doing anything currently, and now we give them a list of 8 different things we expect them to do every day. And human behavioral change doesn't occur that way. I mean, the compliance I've seen different speakers present, oh, and here's my Caries treatment plan, here's my Caries recommendation, and they'll have like all these things that the patient has to do during the day, things that I wouldn't even comply with. And so, you know, the compliance becomes a major issue for us, and human behavioral change doesn't happen that way. It happens the more simple that we can make something for the patient and substitute products for things that they're already using, the easier that becomes, and the success you're going to have in terms of compliance. So start looking at these different agents, and we've really narrowed it down over the years to these 5. The first one that we start with is pH neutralization, and this really goes back to Dr. Philip Marsh's research from the 1980s, where he demonstrated conclusively that the selection pressure for the biofilm that, you know, for carrying bacteria within the biofilm is not sugar availability, but it's actually the prolonged periods of low pH. And so, you know, and to believe that if his research was correct, that might be a strategy where we might want to try and raise the pH in the biofilm, make sure that we have a healthy pH to help reselect new bacteria, and then based on Takahashi and Neved's research, that not only just are we maybe selecting for better bacteria in the biofilm, more healthy bacteria, but we're also selecting for training the biofilm to behave better, because we know that bacteria adapt and change and become acidogenic and aciduric and behave that way if they're exposed to that environment. So it really becomes a primary tools to start addressing in terms of just raising the pH.
The second component is an antibacterial agent, and CariFree specifically uses a 0.2% sodium hypochlorite solution. And the key there is that it is broad spectrum. And so, Dr. Cooch, I'll let you share the preliminary data results of the clinical trial done in Australia on the CariFree treatment rinse.
Yeah, that's, and another really good point. I first started working with chlorhexidine, and I said earlier tonight that I really didn't think chlorhexidine was maybe the optimum antimicrobial agent for us to use against dental caries, because it doesn't have any effect on lactobacillus. And so just in my own practice years ago, then I switched to povidone iodine, which is very problematic as well, if you can imagine rinsing with betadine scrub. And so we really went about looking for a antimicrobial agent that was safe, had the fewest adverse effects, and produced the fewest amount of resistor bacteria. And so we settled on sodium hypochlorite. And so we had a study, a 3-year study in rural Australia, rural Queensland, and we took 2 different populations of children, mixed dentition. They were in the grade schools, and so we had 2 different grade schools, and we gave one the 0.2% sodium hypochlorite rinse once a day at school, 4 days a week, 9 months out of the year. That was the only variable in the study. There was no other education. We didn't give them toothbrushing instructions. We didn't give them anything else. And then we also, to the other group, we gave them pretty standard 0.05% fluoride rinse. And in that group, we found that they had a mean caries incidence to beginning at 0.07. At the end of 1 year, there was really no change in their caries incidence with the standard fluoride rinse. At the end of year 2, we got a 29% reduction, with using this 0.05% fluoride rinse. And at the end of year 3, there was no change again. So our results are pretty consistent when you look at 0.05% fluoride rinses in school type rinse programs. It's around 30% is a pretty good average for what the data for most of the studies that I've looked at. So our data was consistent with other studies that have been done just like that. In the other group, they started with actually a higher incidence of dental caries, just by chance, and we gave them the 0.2% sodium hypochlorite rinse, and they started with a mean caries index of 0.18, and in the first year we had reduced that to 0.09, and in the second year we had reduced that almost in half again to 0.05, and at the end of year 3 there was no additional benefit. But it demonstrated a 73% reduction in the mean caries index in this population just using the sodium hypochlorite rinse once a day, 4 days a week, 9 months of the year. So really it does an example, or the results demonstrate that this is a very effective antimicrobial rinse for dental caries. I would tell you 2 things that we got from the study in addition to that. When I started working with antimicrobial agents and started working with all of these different agents trying to figure out how to treat this disease effectively, and I think I wasn't alone, and I'm not alone. We were all looking for a silver bullet. I was looking for a 50-day treatment that would knock this disease out. I was looking for, the vaccine, the magic potion, something that was going to happen quickly. And biofilm diseases don't respond quickly. That's not a reality, and they're complex, and there isn't going to be a silver bullet. There isn't one. That doesn't exist. It's too complex. There's too many bacteria involved. And so really this is something that you need to use a broad-spectrum antimicrobial agent, and you need to spend time at it. The results of this indicate, if changing a biofilm may take longer than 1 year even. We got improved results at the end of 2 years. However, after a couple of years, whatever results you're going to get, you've probably changed the biofilm as much as you're going to be able to. So I think the conclusions I get from this, number one, the 0.2% sodium hypochlorite rinse is a very effective antimicrobial agent for this disease. And number two, it's going to take longer than I first anticipated, but at some point in time, there's no additional benefit from that rinse. So, and that's just one agent. So when you throw in other factors, however, like counseling diet, and you look at fluorides and xylitol, maybe a gel, other agents that we can add to their treatment strategy without overcomplicating it, I think then that we can maybe shorten that treatment cycle.
So going back to the CTx guide, the third treatment component is fluoride, and I will just go out on a limb here and say that it is safe to assume we all know the benefits of fluoride used in specific concentrations, both in rinses as well as gels. Dr. Cooch, do you have any quick comments on fluoride that you would like to add here?
I would just say, Kendall, I don't think you're really out on a limb making that comment. There's an overwhelming abundance of compelling evidence that fluoride is a great anti-caries agent and a great remineralizing agent. Now, the challenge for us becomes, if we're honest about all of our evidence base, is that we have an abundance of science on children, and we have very few studies on adults that indicate that fluoride is that effective. However, it is. We extrapolate from the studies on children, and we definitely recommend it to be used on all adults with this disease as well. So there's an abundance of scientific evidence, and it's very well accepted, I think, by everybody that fluoride, certainly plays an important role in treating dental caries.
Absolutely. In recent years, xylitol has also received a lot of attention, and there are a lot of new products that have been launched with xylitol just due to its ability to reduce the growth and acid production of those cariogenic bacteria. So this is the fourth treatment component. Another benefit of xylitol is its synergy when combined with fluoride if it's in enough concentrations. Most of the CariFree products have a 20 to 40% xylitol concentration, so we of course do include it with all of our products as well. And then last but certainly not least, the fifth treatment component is NanoHA, which completes the CTx guide. And we have recently added nano-sized particles of hydroxyapatite to some of our products, to our gels specifically, for remin support. And again, I will let Dr. Cooch share a little bit about this with you.
Well, there are a lot of different forms of calcium phosphate that have been used and promoted for remineralization, and I think you're probably aware of all of those that are out in the marketplace. An interesting development in the last couple of years has really been the research that's focused around nanoparticles of hydroxyapatite. And you might ask the question, well, why is that? Well, the reason for that is enamel is a crystalline material that is built of nanoparticles of carbonated hydroxyapatite. So the question that I raised, again, when we started looking at remineralization or adding that as a strategy in our treatment products for caries is, well, we could start with the actual component of enamel, the actual building block of enamel, rather than add some other form of calcium phosphate. It would only just be logical that we should start there. And so using carbonated hydroxyapatite, the research that's been done globally, and there's been a significant amount of research on it in the last 4 or 5 years, the results with carbonated nanoparticles of hydroxyapatite, nanocrystals, is biomimetic, and you get really good results in a very short period of time. So that's the agent that we've added to our list here.
Thank you, Dr. Cooch. And so this is where it kind of gets fun here, and where we will start talking about how we now apply all of this new stuff that we're talking about to our new product line. So again, this is the CTx guide with each of the treatment components that we just talked about included. And what we've done with this new guide is apply it to all of the CariFree products as a means of simplifying what is in each product, and as a method of just assessing the anti-caries benefits of each one and being able to do that very quickly. And so we're going to take a quick look at each of the products here. And every CariFree product is now going to be known by its CTx score based on the number of Caries treatment agents it contains. So for example, the CariFree treatment rinse contains 4 of the 5 agents, so it has been renamed the CTx 4 treatment rinse. And on the side of the package, you will see a little mini CTx guide as well as the list of the CTx agents it contains. So that is there for quick reference. And as you can see on the screen here, the treatment rinse contains pH neutralization, the bacterial component, as well as fluoride and xylitol. So I would assume that's not too difficult. We all get that. We're going to take a further look at the 3 main products, the other 2 products that we have in the CariFree lineup. So we talked about the treatment rinse in reference to the CTx guide specifically. I would like to address another small yet very exciting change that we have made. So by popular demand, the mint flavor has been made much less intense. The treatment rinse, and roll please, we also now have a new flavor available, which is apple. So that is super exciting. I think I can almost hear the clapping in the background from our current customers. I know how excited they will be about this. And I know the apple flavor may sound a little bit strange, but trust me, it's actually much better and much easier to use than the previous flavor. So I think you guys will all really enjoy having that as another option.
Kendall, I just have to say I've used both of these, the new less intense mint and the new apple flavor, and we've been working on the flavor of that rinse for about 6 years now, and we really had a breakthrough in the last year, and I am excited. I have to tell you, these are a quantum leap over what we've been using, so this is really a major breakthrough for us, and so I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. So the second product is the gel, and for those folks on the webinar that were familiar with our previous product line, our 1.1% neutral sodium fluoride gel was previously called the Fluorogel HA Nano. That product has now been changed to the CTx 4 Gel 5000 because it also contains 4 out of the 5 necessary treatment agents, but a little bit different than the CTx 4 treatment rinse. Instead of the antibacterial agent, it contains the Nano HA. So with this gel, we're looking at the pH neutralization, the 1.1% neutral sodium fluoride solution, the HA Nano, as well as the xylitol. Of course, this is one of our more popular products, the CariFree maintenance rinse, which is now called the CTx 3 rinse. Name that, again, because it contains 3 out of the 5 agents, which are pH neutralization, fluoride, and xylitol. So hopefully this will be a better way and provide all of you with a simple way to explain each product to patients as well as compare other products that are out there on the market. You can use that guide to kind of plug in some of the other products, give them their own score, and that's a really easy way to compare the difference between the CariFree products if that's something you're interested in looking at, or even just the difference in the products that are out there on the market. Okay, so thank you guys for hanging on with me here. And now that we have reviewed the 3 main products and their new packaging, I would like to dive into how these CTx products fit into the 3 Caries management guides that we discussed earlier. So the guides for each system, if we remember, there are 3 different assessment methods, and the guides for each of those methods are very similar. They all include the risk levels from low to extreme risk, as well as the 3 different treatment levels: recommended, provisional, and decline. And no matter which guide you're using, all the therapy options that are included just consist of 4 simple 3-month kits. And I'm going to look at each kit here. So first things first, each kit is named by the CTx number, which corresponds to the number of agents included in each kit. So as a general rule, as the patient's risk goes up, so the level of treatment. So let's walk through each kit. We're going to start with the CTx 36. So this kit is designed for your most extreme risk patients. It is the most aggressive therapy that we recommend. It is made up of 3 months of the treatment rinse and gel. To guess, your question is, how did we get the number 36? The answer to that question is really very simple. There are 3 CX4 gels, which is a total of 12 agents because 3 times 4 equals 12. There are 6 CX4 treatment rinse boxes, which is a total of 24 agents because 6 times 4 equals 24. 12 and 24 combined equals 36. So I'll digest for just a moment here. And just as a side note, this kit is available in mint or the apple citrus combo. They'll have 2 options there, which we didn't have before. So that made sense. And now we're going to go down the line of the other kits real quick so that we can make sure this all makes better sense here. So the former treatment kit is now the CTx 26 kit and is kind of designed for just your average high-risk patient. It also comes in the mint and apple citrus flavors. Named the 26 kit because it contains 2 of the CTx4 treatment rinse boxes, so 2 times 4 is 8. 2 of the CTx3 rinse bottles, so 2 times 3 is 6. And 3 of the CTx4 gels, and 3 times 4 is 12. And so you take 8 and 6 and 12, that equals your 26. And just another side note, you guys will notice that each kit now contains 3 tubes of gel rather than just 2, which was also something that we had a lot of customers requesting. So we're now including 3 tubes instead of just 2. So the next kit is our former maintenance kit, which is now the CTx 21 kit. And it contains 3 of the CTx3 rinse bottles, so 3 times 3 is 9. It contains 3 of the CTx4 gels, and 3 times 4 is 12, and 12 9 equals 21. So that's how it got the name 21. So hopefully you're all still with me, kind of starting to get the hang of how this works. And the last kit that we have to cover is the CTx12 kit. This one is also kind of our catch-all kit. It is just a 3-month supply of the CTx4 gel 5000. And again, 3 times 4 is 12, which is why it's our CTx12 kit. And this is probably the most effective kit, and I mentioned before it is kind of our catch-all. What I mean by that is when in doubt, I would prescribe this kit. We see the best compliance because it is just a straight swap, and we're not adding anything new to the patient's routine. So you will see this kit recommended in quite a few places on the 3 different guides when you get them. If you have patients that are a little bit unsure about whether treatment is going to be the right for them or not, I may just want to start them out on the CTx12 kit, just introduce them at a lower level, get them brushing with it, just swap out their toothpaste like Dr. Cooch talked about earlier. Starting with one small change is better than trying to overload them, I think. So that the CTx12 kit is, I think, a really good kit to go for. So I just went through a lot of information numbers. If that was a bit confusing, I don't want you guys to worry so much about the math and how we came up with those numbers. The important part to remember is the greater the number on the kit, the higher the level of therapy, if that makes sense. And each of the guides for the different systems look very similar. They contain basically the same information just based on the type of assessment that you're doing. They all include the 3 different levels of treatment, the recommended, provisional, and decline, which also just allows the patient to ultimately select the treatment that suits them best based on their level of motivation, which is ultimately what we want them to do. So at this time, I would like to open it back up to Dr. Cooch again to give us all an update on the research data and walk us through a case as well.
So I've been collecting data just in my own practice to figure out, how do my patients profile as I go through the risk assessment to get a handle on what does this disease look like in private practice. Like in a blue-collar town, Albany, Oregon, 50,000 people, mostly mill workers and farmers. I would, classify us as blue-collar here. We've got the data from John Featherstone's studies on what does this disease look like, how does it profile out in a population of patients in the dental school in San Francisco. So I was curious to see, well, how does it profile out in my own practice? And I'm actually tracking all the data and the risk factors and the disease indicators as well. But just one thing I wanted to share with you is I track whether or not the patients are on our risk assessment form. The first question is we're trying to engage them into this whole thought process. In the waiting room is, are you interested in a free screening today? And 78% of my patients say yes to that. So that's we're trying to get that number up higher. Interestingly, there are a lot of people that just don't want to know when they, it comes to disease. So I found it kind of interesting. I thought that would be like 95%, but it's about 78% and slowly increasing. As I profiled out my patients, and this is on based on 865 patients now from the last 3 or 4 months of my practice, about 3% of them profile out as low risk. That is, they have no risk factors, no disease indicators, and low biofilm challenge. And 30% of them profile out about moderate risk, 31% as high risk with a high biofilm challenge, about 16% that are high risk with a low biofilm challenge, and then I have about 19% that are extreme risk that have risk factor disease indicators and a high biofilm challenge. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting as I continue to track this data, and we're tracking it on 3 other practices right at the moment as well, and we're going to do a multi-site study later in the year and come up with about 10,000 data points to look at. Interestingly, our risk patients add up to about 66%. We're very close to the data that John Featherstone got in his own research at UCSF. So the disease profile is kind of interestingly to me, much like it did in John Featherstone's study. So I just wanted to share with you a patient again. From the last webinar that we had such a huge response, and by the way, thank you for all of the emails that I received at last webinar. We're going to continue that process throughout the year as we then start to look at taking this whole concept of the CTx kits and then look at, so how do we prescribe therapy and how do we treat these cases, and then even get into behavioral management and wellness coaching, like how do I sit with this person, what are the verbal skills I need to help them in terms of making whatever behavioral changes they need to make in addition to the compliance issues. So we're going to go through that throughout the rest of the year. But here's a patient that maybe some of you have seen before and maybe not, but I thought it was kind of a good one just to use an example here tonight. This is a 21-year-old male. He grew up in my practice. He left my practice when he graduated from high school. He was decay-free. He left to go on a college baseball scholarship. I did not see him for 3 years, and like the guy was healthy, an athlete, and as I get to see him as he comes home from 3 years of college, and gets into my office for a checkup, his brushing habits have slipped dramatically, and he has also acquired cigarettes while he was in college, which not really sure I understand why that happened. As we take a look at his radiographs, you see certainly we've got some major issues going on here, and he reported to me that he had 6 new cavities in the 3 years while he was away at college, and I'm looking at his radiographs, looking at all of these proximal radiographic radiolucency here, saying to myself, we got some major issues going on here. I need to figure out, what to do for him. And the answer is not just drill and fill. The answer is trying to figure out how to best help this patient. And when I look at his risk assessment form, and you'll recognize that this is our new risk assessment form, which is being unveiled here tonight. The language, under the risk factors, at the top, it wasn't very interesting. He said no to having a free screening, and after I talked to him a little bit, he decided to have the screening, and then he pegged the meter. He absolutely had a high biofilm challenge. But, his risk factors, he noticed that plaque were building up on his teeth. He didn't notice that. He's not taking any medications. What it really came down to is he's drinking something other than water a couple times during the day. He's not snacking. He did admit to, he'd taken up cigarette smoking. In the next section, so that patient fills it all out in the waiting room and self-reports all the risk factors to me. The next section is the disease indicators, and the language here has changed for those of you who've been using our most current risk assessment form. The language has changed, and we've tried to make it consistent with what's going to be used in the dental schools on the Axiom software program, and I work with the Caries committee over the last couple of months and kind of bait and negotiate to get the terms that we all feel good about and feel comfortable with. And so the language we came up with on this form then is new or progressing visible cavitations, new or progressing proximal radiographic radiolucencies, new active white spot lesions, and then we've done a little bit from the schools just from the standpoint of, did they have a cavity in the last 1 year? Did he have a cavity in the last 3 years? In private practice, every insurance agency now or insurance plan is starting to develop their own definition of a disease indicator. Did they have two cavities in the last 3 years? These insurance plans are all over the board. So the real question is, I want you to be able to apply the critical thinking to this. Is this patient's decay history a concern to you? Does it concern you? And if it is, it should well be a disease indicator. So, of course, for this patient, we have yes on all 4 disease indicators here, and then we look at the biofilm challenge, and he's, basically off the chart on his biofilm challenge. And so then we take all of those points, we go down to the professional assessment summary. And number 1, again, you're going to notice that these have changed. But now the question is, are these a concern? He has risk factors. We ask yes or no. Do they have risk factors? Yes or no. But the issue is, if they have risk factors, are they a concern to you? Again, apply some critical thinking. This is not a mathematical quiz where you add up the columns and you set out a number and then you decide what to do. It's really a matter of, he has risk factors. Are those risk factors a concern to you? He has disease indicators. Do those concern you? And he has a high biofilm challenge. Are those a concern to you? And then, of course, you go down in the grid below, and these patients profile based on that as low risk, number 1, all the way over to extreme risk, number 5. So he profiles out correctly as a number 5. And on talking to him about, how do you want to approach and treat this, pick the provisional or kind of middle ground in terms of treatment. And I will tell you, going back to the practice data that I shared with you, 50.22% of patients are accepting some form of treatment. And one of the things we know from our human behavioral studies is that patients, when given the options to do something, and when one of the options is to do nothing, more than 50% of them choose to do at least something. So the data that I got in my own practice is consistent with human behavioral studies. So we look at this and we come up with an assessment. Well, I started, asking him, so that's interesting. You're drinking something besides milk or water more than a couple times a day. Tell me about that. And he said, I drink Gatorade. Tell me about that. You drink Gatorade. You drink that? He goes, yeah, I drink Gatorade. That's all I drink pretty much is Gatorade. And I said, well, that's interesting. So we sat and talked about that. And for those of you who are on the line with us tonight, you know that Gatorade, like I told him, they got it at practice. He assumed it was healthy for him. It was replacing his electrolytes, so he wouldn't have cramping, and he's an athlete, so he figured it was good for him. He'd start drinking that just as his beverage every day, all day long. The challenge with it's really a sports drink meant to be drank at the time as physical activity, like during a sporting event. The problem if you start drinking it all day long is that the number 2 ingredient after water is sucrose. So that certainly increases his caries risk and probably explains, he's drinking sugar all day long, dropping the pH. You get the demineralization, those prolonged periods of low pH, net mineral loss, and now we've got a biofilm challenge going on, and we've got mineral loss from his teeth, and we've got decay. And this person is extreme risk for dental care. So as we go through that assessment process, for this patient, what we need to address are, what do we do in terms of therapy? Obviously, we need to restore the lesions, but at the same time, what are we going to do in terms of addressing, are there some behavioral components to this disease for him that we need to address and change as well? So in his case, I explained to him what was going on with the Gatorade. So when you look at this, he filed out as a number 5. If he wanted to take the recommended therapy, that would be the antimicrobial, the TX36 kit. That's a 3-month supply. And if he wanted to take a provisional approach to it, understanding that's maybe not going to be as effective and he may require longer treatment with that, you prescribe the CTX26 kit, and that's what he chose to do. So, it's pretty easy to go through this process, and then it's just a matter of, which kit is appropriate depending upon which level of therapy, what kind of strategy that the patient wants to take.
Excellent, Dr. Cooch. Thank you for walking us through that. And I would like to actually just back up for a moment here. I really like that you kind of walked through some of the new changes on this ERA form and just kind of point out those changes that we made to the disease indicators as well as that professional assessment summary at the bottom where we're asking if those factors are a concern to you, kind of ties all the way back to one of the first slides that we talked about, which is the major problem in that we can't look at, in private practice, the population statistics. We need to be looking at patients longitudinally. And so this is really where that kind of comes into play, and this is what is going to allow you guys to take into consideration the patient's history as you're sitting there and look at that patient and say, is this a concern to me? And if I'm concerned about it, then, we can make that assessment summary. So let's go back here. And I want to thank you guys all for just hanging on with us. I know we both covered quite a lot of information tonight, but we appreciate your time and going through some of these new and exciting updates we have. So if you are interested in the new products, they are currently available to pre-order. We'll be shipping May 1st through May 15th. So feel free to give us a call, or you can visit the website that is listed there on the screen. If you would like more information, then I will go ahead and open it up to Laura at this time if we would like to take a few minutes to answer some questions coming in.
Yeah, we have a lot of good conversation going on, a lot of great questions. So I think we'll throw a couple to both you and Dr. Cooch. The first one that we've received a few times, so I think it's worthy of addressing, is have any of the product formulations changed?
I will go ahead and answer that. The answer is no. None of the product formulations have changed. The only change, which we talked about, was just the flavor to the treatment rinse. So the flavor of the treatment rinse is now the intense mint as well as the apple, but the rest of the products are the same formulation. The only thing that's actually changed is just the packaging and the labeling and that kind of thing.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kendall. And this question, maybe for you, Dr. Cooch, it seems like the assessment of looking at cavities and the biofilm challenge is the quickest and easiest for me in my practice, but what are the benefits of the other system? What am I missing?
Well, that's a really good question, Laura, and I think as we went through, even this case that that I showed you guys tonight, if we back up there for just a second, look at the third level of assessment where we're just using disease indicators only, and that's available as an option, and then you have a case management guide again that's just based on the disease indicators. This patient obviously had all the disease indicators, right? He had maximal radiographic radiolucencies. He had visible cavitations. He had new and active white spot lesions. He had it all going on. So it's like if you just looked at those disease indicators, he would profile out as an extreme or high risk, and he would be recommended therapy would be a CTX36 kit, and a provisional therapy would be a CTX26 kit, and if he declined, that would be no kit. And if you look at it along with the disease indicators and the biofilm challenge, again, you're going to get the same answer using the biofilm challenge. he's going to profile out as a patient number 5. And again, the same recommendations on that Caries management guide. The recommended therapy is a CTx 36 kit, and the provisional therapy would be a CTx 26 kit. So I can come up with the same answer. However, when you're using the biofilm challenge, you have an opportunity to kind of monitor your therapy. If he picks the antimicrobial therapy, the CTx 36 kit, you've got an opportunity to kind of monitor his therapy every 3 months and see if he's making progress and see if there's, see how that's working for him. Now, if we go one step further into the Caries risk assessment, so we're using the risk factors, the disease indicators, and the biofilm challenge, now into that specific conversation of like looking at your risk factors. I noticed that you answered yes to the drinks. Tell me more about that. And I discovered that his issue was Gatorade. For us, we're going to again use the same risk assessment form, and we would see that he has risk factors. They are a concern. He has disease indicators a concern. He's got biofilm challenge a concern. He still profiles out as a number 5, and with that Caries management guide, again, you get for a recommended therapy, he would get a CTx 36 kit, and a provisional therapy, he would get a CTx 26 kit. Now, the piece that's missing if you're not using the risk factors is you don't know what's driving the disease. So you don't have the opportunity to say to the patient, all I'm going to do is fill your teeth, and I'm recommending some good products for you to use. But unless you get back to what's actually causing or maybe driving that biofilm disease in his mouth, I don't have the opportunity to help him make the changes to eliminate his risk and maybe completely stop the disease process in his mouth. So it's like without the risk factors, you don't know that Gator was the problem, or it's harder to find that if you just start asking random questions like what do you drink, or what do you do, or do you brush, do you floss, those kind of questions. So having a standardized risk assessment form has great value of answering the why, and Kendall mentioned this earlier tonight, the risk assessment form really answers the why question. Why do your teeth look like this? And, we're going to have the recommended therapy, and without doing the risk assessment, we can get to the recommended therapies, but we're going to miss that component of the why, so they're not going to have the opportunity to address that. So that's really a really important question that the doctor asked, Laura. So give an opportunity to see the difference. It's easier just to use the disease indicators, and maybe the biofilm challenge and monitor your therapy. But if you really want to get to the root of the disease, you have to figure out what's driving it, and the best way to do that is with a risk assessment form. So great question, boy.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Cooch. And this will be probably the last question that we get to tonight, but just a reminder, if you have questions we don't address, we will be answering those throughout the week, so we will get you an answer. But this last question I think is a great one just to kind of wrap up and end on, and I think I'll direct it to Kendall. And the question is, I am a current customer and would like to take a closer look at the Caries management guides just to see the differences. Where can I find those? How do I go about locating those?
Yes, that is a good question. Like I said earlier, we will have some very short, probably shorter than about 10 minutes, some videos, recorded videos that we will be able to send to anybody that would like more information and just to kind of hear, the 10,000-foot view on each of the systems to kind of help make the decision on which one is going to be the best fit for you and which system you're looking at implementing. So just feel free to contact us either by phone or by email. If you visit that link there, there's a spot to email us, and we'll get in touch with you. So either way, and we can send you those videos.
Thank you. So thank you to Kendall and Dr. Cooch for your time tonight, and thank you to everyone out there who took the time to listen in. We really appreciate it, and we hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.